Hey guys, what's up? This is Panzer Dragon, and today we'll be doing the patch 4.19 tier list. So in this patch, some of the top tier champions have been nerfed, and some champions did get buffed. And also there's a champion that is getting ever so more popular and looks incredibly strong. And as opposed to my last tier list in patch 4.18, in this tier list it'll be a bit of both, having carry type champions and team fighting champions too. And of course my opinions on certain champions do change as time goes on, and sometimes I feel like this champion is stronger than this champion, but maybe previously I hadn't thought so. But I can tell you in this tier list that there won't be a lot of changes since, not a lot of champions have been changed and it isn't the preseason yet. So with all that being said, let's get started. Alright, so the previous top tier list from patch 4.17 is Maokai at number 1, Ryze at number 2, Ariel at number 3, Lulu at number 4, and Rumble at number 5. But in patch 4.19, the current tier list goes something like Rumble at number 1, Ariel at number 2, Nidalee at number 3, Gnar at number 4, and Riven at number 5. So why is Rumble at number 1? Why do I feel like he's better than everyone else? I feel that he is really good in solo queue just because of his teamfight presence. He has a lot of base damage, his ult is a really good zoning tool, his Q is AoE, his E is a slow, and he's fairly tanky with a scrap shield, plus from the Zhonya's and Liandry's and whatever else he has with his items. And the best thing about him is, even if you suck in lane or do decent or whatever, you still have that teamfight presence, you have the base damage and the ult to zone enemies, and you're just another damage source who's also fairly tanky. And another thing that's great about Rumble is you show your presence if you are fed. You'll be a very high threat target in teamfights if you are 8-5 or 8-3 or whatever, as you'll be doing a lot of damage while being fairly tanky, and he also doesn't really take a lot of skill. As long as you know how to use his ultimate, you're good to go. As for me, whenever I want to go top lane and I want to win the game, I'll pick Rumble since I know that I'll be consistent and I'll have a really good mid-game, late-game presence. And of course, if I ever do get shit on top lane main challengers, then I can farm safely with my E if something ever does happen. And the reason I don't feel like Maokai should be in this tier list is because he's been nerfed, quite a bit. I feel like he is better for competitive play instead of solo queue. I mean, before pre-nerf, he was super scary to face since he had a lot of teamfight presence. But I mean, right now, he still has his teamfight presence, but you just feel like he can't carry. And that's kind of a problem if you feel like you're gonna rely on your team. So next up at number 2 is Aurelia. So at one point in solo queue, the top 3 bans were Maokai, Alistar, and Nidalee, and then the 2 other top laners were Aurelia and Ryze. But since Aurelia is the only one out of those 4 who haven't been nerfed, she is still going to be one of the top 5 top laners for solo queue. And you might be asking, was that nerf to Ryze's Q really that big? Honestly, when base damages do get hit, it means the champion doesn't become as consistent, therefore saying if you get ahead, you will be a threat, but now if you get more behind, you don't have the base damage to back that up. So I don't think Ryze is as powerful as he was before. Next up at number 3 is Nidalee. So why is Nidalee back in the tier list? Didn't her base damage just get nerfed a while ago? Yes, but there's a new popular champion coming out in the top lane, which is AP Nidalee. So the nerfs were more oriented to AD Nidalee, which was really popular at the time, but now they've nerfed her base attack damage, which means less damage on Triforce, and they also buffed her AP ratios onto her Cougar Q, which is decent but not the biggest thing, but still helps for AP Nidalee. Now obviously this AP Nidalee isn't as strong as old AP Nidalee, but she does have more kill potential with the reworked Nidalee. And yeah, I do feel like she's a really good top laner right now. She does have the potential to carry, and her base damage is pretty strong too. Next up at number 4 is Gnar. So what I've been seeing with Gnar recently is that he's being banned in Champ Select, and they're also nerfing him in the next patch or something like that. So with that being said, right now he's a really strong champion. He can provide a lot of CC with his Mega Gnar form, which also has a lot of base damage, and so does his Mini Gnar with his W, shredding maximum health damage per every 3 hits. So Gnar does make a really good tank, and if he gets behind, he's still going to be useful. If he gets ahead, he's going to be hella useful. And in lane, he is range, which is really powerful, as if you have range in the top lane, you're going to have a really big advantage over those melee champions since they cannot get to you. And last but not least, Riven. So Riven is obviously one of those champions who suck if you get behind, but if you go ahead, you're going to be really powerful and can carry the game. Especially if you're a Riven main, you're going to want to try and carry the game, And so what you're going to do is either split push, go into team fights with flash up, and then just wipe everyone out with your combo. But if you don't play the top lane and you're looking for a champion to play that's, consistent or easy to play, Riven is not the champion for you, as I do feel like she does take time to learn and nurture. She's definitely not ban worthy since not a lot of people play him and it's only Riven mains who play her. But basically, if you're looking to carry games, Riven is a champion for you. But if you don't have time to master her or, get good with her, I advise you to pick one of the other champions in this tier list. Next up, we'll be doing the AD carry tier list. And so previously in patch 4.18, the tier list went something like Lucian at number 1, Corki at number 2, Jinx at number 3, Vayne at number 4, and Ezreal at number 5. But with the new patch and my opinion changing, the tier list goes something like Corki at number 1, Lucian at number 2, Ezreal at number 3, Vayne at number 4, and Jinx at number 5. So with the nerf to Lucian's ultimate cooldown and his W having no more AD ratio but a buff to the movement speed, he's still good in terms of just being Lucian. It's just, there will be some teamfights where you don't have your ultimate, but that's okay since he has his other spells. And the W removal of the AD ratio only hits his late game, as it does like 40 damage less, but that's okay since he has, the crits coming from his auto attacks and his Q and his ultimate. But I do feel like Corki kind of beats him since it is a minor nerf, and the only good AD carry who hasn't been touched is Corki, so I do feel like he deserves the number 1 spot. And if I were an AD carry main in solo queue, I'd pick either Corki or Lucian. Those would be my 2 go-to champions to win the game. And at number 3 is Ezreal. And a lot of people keep saying that Ezreal is shit, but I don't understand why people keep playing him if he's so shit. So the buffs to Ezreal, the 0.1 increase on the AD ratio for his Q, and the passive, which now hold the duration of 6 seconds instead of 5, were really minor. It didn't affect him a lot, but it kind of helps. And just going into like Triforce, Blader Room, King into Last Whisper is pretty good on him, as he can just poke you down and do a lot of damage. I do feel like Ezreal is a weaker version of Corki since they have a similar build path and of course skills, but since Corki is a number 1, Ezreal deserves to be somewhere around number 3. And then number 4 is Vayne and Jinx, and what I'm trying to say here is basically if you're a good Vayne, you're probably going to be better than a good Jinx, as Vayne has more mechanical and carry potential, although a fed Jinx is also scary in team fights, so it is hard to say who's better, but I'd say these AD carries are on the same level. Next up, we'll be doing the jungle tier list, and previously it was Rammus at number 1, Kha'Zix at number 2, Jarvan at number 3, Lee Sin at number 4, and Vi at number 5. And now in patch 4.19, it goes something like Rammus still at number 1, Jarvan number 2, Kha'Zix at number 3, Fiddlesticks at number 4, and Hecarim at number 5. Alright, so Rammus is still number 1 as he hasn't been nerfed yet, and of course he is really dominant as he's a really good mid and late game tank, since his W gives him like 120 armor or something like that, plus he has loads of base damage and CC. And now, as you can see in this tier list, Jarvan and Kha'Zix have switched. Why is that? It's just a personal opinion. I feel like Jarvan is better than Kha'Zix because, I just like Jarvan more. He just feels more dominant and powerful whenever I use him. Sometimes I have bad games on Kha'Zix, but I have more bad games on Kha'Zix than I ever would with Jarvan. And even if I do have a bad game on Jarvan, I still feel useful as I have the CC and the ultimate to lock people down. With Kha'Zix, I do feel like I'm useless. My slow's there, but I can't really go in, and I can't build tank since I don't feel like Kha'Zix should be building tank. And yeah, I feel like Jarvan's a bit better. And now at number 4, we do have Fiddlesticks replacing Lee Sin. Why is this? I feel like Lee Sin is good in the right hands, but even if that player is good, I just feel like, he scales really badly and poorly. He's not as useful as, say, someone like Jarvan or Rammus, and I just feel like he's an overpicked champion, and everyone's just kind of getting used to him already. Since they know what Lee Sin's going to do, it's easy to predict what he's going to do next. Is he going to insect you? Probably, so the AD carry flashes immediately, and basically it's easy to outplay Lee Sin if you know what he's going to do next. Now let's talk about Fiddlesticks. Why is he so good? It's because his ultimate can be really game changing. He has a huge impact on team fights. His ganks usually land a kill since he has a lot of CC and damage. And I think the worst part about facing a Fiddlesticks is that you cannot initiate a fight because you know that if you initiate, he will just counter initiate and kill your team. And so you always have to think about where is Fiddlesticks when you're trying to team fight or something like that. He can even ace a team with Baron since, his ultimate is game changing. And the reason you don't see him as much, and there's like people who are Fiddle mains, is because he's a really weird champion to learn. Like his playstyle is very, I don't know, it's weird. Like, you gotta know the tricks and stuff. I play a decent fiddle, but I'm like not really good at him or confident that I can play him solo queue. But if you know there's a fiddle main on the other team, you should probably instantly ban that, since you don't want to deal with the crap that Fail6 does to your team. And at number 5 we do have Hecarim. So why is he replacing Vi? Honestly, his base damage is really strong, like his Q. It does 200 damage every 2 to 4 seconds based on how much stacks you have, and that's enough to make him a really good bruiser. But that's not why I like him. The reason I like him is because he's so carry oriented. Since he has a lot of mobility, he can gank lanes easy, and when Hecarim gets rolling, he can actually duel solo laners, and if he builds Triforce or Ghostblade, he becomes a super bruiser who does a lot of damage. The only downside I don't like about him is he's not the best tank. I mean, his W helps him to be tanky in teamfights, and so that's really good for winning teamfights. But if you're on the defensive and you get like exploded, you have to run back with Hecarim, and you can't lifesteal off people with the W. As for why Hecarim replaced Vi, well, she's meh. She's like decent, but I don't feel like she's a top 5. Next up we'll be doing the mid tier list, and previously we had Syndra at number 1, Jason number 2, Katarina at number 3, Fizz at number 4, and Ahri at number 5. But with my opinions changing, the only change I'm going to make is Katarina will be replaced by Zed at number 3. I feel that Katarina is really good for winning teamfights, as she does have snowball potential in the teamfight since she can reset off 1 kill. But it's just that no one plays her. I'm not sure why. I know that she's powerful, but instead of playing her, people would play Zed, and so I tend to see Zed more than I do Katarina. And like what a good Zed would do is after the early game phase, he would go split pushing and try and get that 1v1 split push going on, and then it would just create pressure around the map, and he can also make picks on his own since he has the ultimate to finish people off. The only thing that I don't like about him is his late game scaling. There's a lot of counters to him like QSS, Zhonya's, and Exhaust. Although I will say that some people might feel like he's number 1, I feel like he's a bit overplayed, and personally I feel like Syndra deserves a number 1 spot because of how much power she has in her kit. You know, big one-shot burst, AoE stun, a long-range stun, and decent sustain damage. Other than that, the mid lane tier list doesn't change that much. Next up we'll be doing the support tier list, and previously the support tier list went something like Janna at number 1, Blitzcrank at number 2, Nami at number 3, Thresh at number 4, and Zilean at number 5. And now in the current support tier list, the tier list goes something like Janna still at number 1, Thresh at number 2, Blitzcrank at number 3, Sona at number 4, and Nami at number 5. So even though they nerfed the W cooldown on Janna, she's still really good. She has the mobility kicking in from her W, and her shield is still really powerful. On top of that, she has an AoE heal to her whole team. So the W cooldown wasn't a big deal, and I do feel like she still deserves the number 1 spot. And the number 2 is Thresh. Even though he's been nerfed several times, he's still pretty good for solo queue, especially if you want to carry yourself out of your own lane instead of relying on your team. Thresh is the way to go. Next up is Blitzcrank at number 3. He's being bumped up a bit to number 3 just because he's kind of lousy in lane, but basically out of lane, if you get 1 hook, that's all you need to turn around a game. And he's kind of more tankier than Thresh because of his mana barrier. Plus I think he has one of the best bursts as a support with his Q plus R combo. And yeah, he's just really good at catching people out and turning around team fights. Next up is Sona, and she's actually really unpopular right now. Like, I don't see her that much in solo queue, but whenever I do, she's a real terror mid and late game because of her ultimate, you know, the AoE stun, plus the heals coming from her W and the shield that she provides with it too. The only problem about Sona is that she's pretty squishy in lane, so if she ever gets caught out by, say, a Thresh hook or a Blitzcrank hook, she's probably going to explode. But if she can keep poking the enemy with her Q, that's all good. And the last one is Nami. So Nami's like pretty consistent, but I do feel like she's kind of falling out of flavor. Like, she's still pretty popular, but I just feel like there's better supports than her right now. And I think one of her problems right now is that she's not the best roamer, as in she can't initiate fights like someone like Thresh or Blitzcrank or Janna. I mean, the only way she can catch people out is by landing that bubble or getting a good ultimate, although those 2 spells are really easy to avoid, and yeah, she doesn't really have that much catch, so I would say for solo queue, she isn't the best, but for competitive, she's pretty good. And that ends my 5 tier list for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, feel free to subscribe and look out for the next one. Although I will say right now, for the next tier list, I do feel like it's going to take a while for me to understand what the flavors are and like what the good champions are, since it's probably going to be preseason and a bunch of things are going to change. so bear with me while I do my research and see what the best picks are for the next patch. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I'm Panzer Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.